She destroyed what was mine, but my quiet revenge changed everything. The ceramic shards scattered across the kitchen floor like fallen stars, each piece reflecting the overhead light as it caught my eye. What had once been my grandmother's prized tea set, the delicate blue and white porcelain that had survived 3 generations, now lay in ruins at Jessica's feet. She stood there, her perfectly manicured hands on her hips, a satisfied smirk playing across her glossy lips. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with false innocence. "I guess I'm just naturally clumsy around old junk." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale as he surveyed the destruction. The tea set had been Mom's most treasured possession, passed down from her grandmother who had brought it from Ireland with nothing but hope and determination. Now it was nothing but debris on the cold tile floor. "It was just an accident, sweetheart," Dad finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. But his eyes couldn't meet mine. We both knew the truth. Jessica didn't do accidents. Everything she did was calculated, deliberate, designed to inflict maximum damage while maintaining plausible deniability. I knelt down and carefully picked up the largest piece, part of the teapot's handle that Mom used to wrap her small fingers around every Sunday morning. The weight of it in my palm felt like holding a piece of my heart that had been torn away. Jessica's heel clicked against the floor as she stepped closer, deliberately crushing another fragment under her designer shoe. "Really, Emma," she continued, her tone shifting to mock concern. "You shouldn't leave fragile antiques where they can get broken. This house has so much clutter, it's dangerous." Clutter. She called my mother's memories clutter. "Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me and sharing these stories of resilience and justice. If you believe that family bonds should be protected from those who seek to destroy them, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach others who need to hear these stories of triumph." Now, let's see how this unfolds. 6 months. It had been 6 months since Dad brought Jessica home as his friend, who needed a place to stay temporarily. 6 months since she'd slithered into our lives with her designer luggage and predatory smile, claiming she was there to help Dad heal from Mom's death. Help. What a twisted interpretation of her true intentions. I clutched the ceramic fragment tighter, feeling its sharp edge bite into my skin. The pain was nothing compared to the ache in my chest as I watched my father, the man who once stood up to bullies, who taught me to fight for what's right, cower before this woman who was systematically destroying everything Mom had built. "Don't worry about cleaning it up," Jessica said, waving her hand dismissively. "The housekeeper can deal with it tomorrow. I've already called a service to come and declutter some of the other outdated pieces. This house needs a complete renovation if we're going to move forward properly." Move forward. She made it sound like Mom's entire existence was something to be moved past, discarded like yesterday's newspaper. The woman who had raised me, who had filled this house with love and laughter, who had carefully curated every piece of furniture and decoration with thought and meaning. All of it was just obstacles in Jessica's path to total domination. That night, I lay in my bed listening to the sounds of Jessica rearranging furniture downstairs, the scraping of chair legs against hardwood, the thud of boxes being moved, the clink of glass being packed away. She was erasing Mom from our home one piece at a time, and Dad was letting her do it. But Jessica had made one crucial mistake. She assumed that because I was 18, because I was quiet and grieving, because I seemed overwhelmed by the magnitude of loss, she assumed I was powerless. She saw a broken girl and thought she'd found an easy target. She had no idea that broken things can be the most dangerous. The next morning, I found Jessica in Mom's garden, yanking up the rose bushes that had taken 5 years to establish. The thorns had drawn blood from her unprotected hands, but she continued her destruction with manic determination. Each plant she tore from the earth was another piece of Mom's legacy destroyed. "These old roses are so unhealthy," she called out when she noticed me watching from the kitchen window. "I'm going to plant something more modern. Maybe some nice low-maintenance succulents. Much more practical." Practical. There was that word again. Everything about Mom, her love of literature, her collection of vintage jewelry, her carefully tended garden, her tradition of Sunday family dinners, all of it was impractical to Jessica. All of it needed to be eliminated. I made myself a cup of coffee using the emergency mug from the back of the cabinet, since Jessica had accidentally broken 3 of our regular coffee cups the week before. As I sipped the bitter liquid, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Mom's jewelry box, the antique wooden chest that had sat on her dresser for as long as I could remember, was sitting on the kitchen counter with a donate sticker attached to its lid. My hands shook as I opened it. Empty. Completely empty. The pearl necklace that had been my great-grandmother's. The wedding ring Dad had proposed with. The charm bracelet I'd added to every Christmas and birthday since I was 5. The diamond earrings Dad had given Mom for their 20th anniversary. All of it gone. "Oh, you found that old thing," Jessica said, breezing into the kitchen with dirt under her fingernails and satisfaction in her voice. "I dropped it off at the donation center yesterday. Your father and I agreed that it was taking up unnecessary space. Where are the contents?" I asked, my voice dead quiet. "Contents?" Jessica tilted her head with exaggerated confusion. "Oh, you mean those old trinkets?" "Honestly, Emma, most of it was costume jewelry anyway. Not worth keeping. I kept a few pieces that had actual value, the diamonds and pearls and such. They're safely stored away." Safely stored away. In her bedroom, no doubt. In her personal collection. Another theft disguised as organization. That afternoon, while Jessica was out getting her nails done and Dad was at work, I went through the house methodically, documenting everything that had disappeared. Mom's books, gone, replaced by Jessica's romance novels. Mom's artwork, taken down, stored in the basement for safekeeping. Mom's piano, sold because nobody plays it anymore anyway. But it was in Mom's closet that I found the most devastating evidence of Jessica's systematic erasure. Every dress, every blouse, every piece of clothing that held memories of family dinners and school events and quiet Sunday mornings, all of it gone. In its place hung Jessica's wardrobe, her clothes now occupying the space where Mom's presence used to linger in the form of familiar scents and soft fabrics. I sat on the floor of that empty closet and finally let myself cry. Not the gentle tears of grief I'd been carrying for months, but the hot, angry tears of someone who'd watched their entire world be dismantled piece by piece while being told it was for their own good. That's when I found it, hidden behind the baseboard in the back corner of the closet, a loose board that Mom had mentioned once during one of our cleaning sessions. "Emergency hiding spot," she'd joked. "You never know when you might need to keep something safe from prying eyes." Inside the small space, wrapped in tissue paper, was a manila envelope with my name written in Mom's careful handwriting. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it with trembling fingers. The contents made me gasp. Legal documents, bank statements for accounts I didn't know existed, insurance policies with beneficiaries listed that would shock Dad, and a letter written in Mom's hand, dated just 2 weeks before she died. "My dearest Emma," it began. "If you're reading this, it means something has happened to make you search for answers. I pray that I'm wrong about what I suspect, but I've learned to trust my instincts about people. If a woman ever comes into your father's life who seems too good to be true, who appears at just the right moment with just the right solutions, be very careful. Predators know how to spot vulnerable prey." My hands shook as I continued reading. Mom had been suspicious of Jessica from the beginning, suspicious enough to hire a private investigator, suspicious enough to discover that Jessica Martin wasn't even her real name. Her real name was Jennifer Masterson, and she was a professional. A woman who targeted recently widowed men with substantial assets, wormed her way into their lives, and systematically cleaned them out before disappearing. She'd done it at least 3 times before, leaving behind a trail of broken families and empty bank accounts. The private investigator's report was thorough. Photos of Jessica entering and leaving other men's homes. Documentation of her previous marriages and subsequent divorces. Financial records showing patterns of theft and manipulation. And most damning of all, recorded phone conversations where she laughed about her current project, my grieving father. But Mom hadn't just documented Jessica's crimes. She'd set traps. Beautiful, legal, ironclad traps that were waiting to spring at precisely the right moment. The bank accounts I'd never heard of? They contained duplicates of everything valuable in our house. Mom had secretly had appraisals done on her jewelry, her antiques, her art collection. Every piece Jessica stole, every item she donated, every treasure she claimed had no value. It was all documented, photographed, and legally protected. The insurance policies weren't just life insurance. Mom had taken out specific policies protecting against theft, fraud, and property damage. Policies that Jessica would have triggered the moment she started her systematic destruction of our home. And the final surprise, a trust account that contained enough money to rebuild everything Jessica had destroyed, plus enough left over to ensure she faced serious criminal charges for her crimes. Mom had known. Somehow, she'd known exactly what kind of person Jessica was and exactly what she would do. And she'd spent her final weeks not just grieving her approaching death, but building an elaborate defense system to protect the family she was leaving behind. At the bottom of the envelope was a small key and an address, a storage unit across town where Mom had hidden copies of everything important, plus items too valuable to leave where Jessica could find them. The real jewelry, the actual antiques, the family photos and documents that told the true story of our lives. I sat in that empty closet, surrounded by the lingering scent of Mom's perfume, and felt something shift inside me. The broken, grieving girl Jessica had been manipulating was gone. In her place sat someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who had inherited not just Mom's eyes and her smile, but her strategic mind and her protective instincts. Someone who was about to show Jessica Martin, or Jennifer Masterson, or whatever her real name was, exactly what happened when you tried to destroy the wrong family. The storage unit was like opening a treasure chest. Everything Jessica claimed was worthless junk was there, carefully preserved and labeled. Mom's real jewelry sparkled under the fluorescent lights, each piece worth more than Jessica probably made in a year of her schemes. The antiques were museum-quality pieces that collectors would kill for. The artwork included several pieces by artists whose value had skyrocketed since Mom's death. But it was the final box that made me smile for the first time in months. Inside were dozens of photographs of Jessica in our house, taken from various angles and with different cameras. Mom had documented every room, every piece of furniture, every valuable item exactly as it was before Jessica arrived, time-stamped, dated, and legally certified. There was also a letter from the private investigator, addressed to me personally. "Dear Miss Emma," it read, "your mother was one of the most thorough clients I've ever worked with. She anticipated every possible scenario and prepared countermeasures for each one. The evidence package she compiled would convict Jessica in any court in the country. But your mother was also wise enough to know that sometimes the most effective justice happens outside the courtroom. Use this information however you see fit, but know that you have enough ammunition to destroy Jessica's ability to ever hurt another family." I spent the weekend organizing everything, creating a timeline of Jessica's crimes, and matching them with Mom's evidence. The pattern was clear and devastating. Jessica had been planning this con from the moment she met Dad at Mom's funeral. Yes, the funeral. She'd actually attended Mom's funeral, not as a mourner, but as a hunter, scouting her next victim. The photos from that day showed her in the background, watching Dad's grief-stricken face with calculating eyes. She'd followed him home, learned his routines, and then accidentally encountered him at the grocery store 3 weeks later. Their chance meeting had been as choreographed as a ballet. By Monday morning, I had a plan. Not the kind of explosive confrontation that Jessica would be expecting, but something far more devastating. Something that would give her a taste of her own medicine before revealing the full scope of what she'd gotten herself into. I started small, while Jessica was out at her weekly spa appointment, paid for with Dad's credit card, of course. I began returning things to their proper places. Not everything, just enough to make her notice. Mom's favorite coffee mug appeared back in the cabinet. A family photo found its way back to the mantel. Small things that would seem like Dad's doing, like maybe he was finally standing up to her. The effect was immediate. Jessica came home to find the photo on the mantel and flew into a rage that she tried to disguise as concern. "Max," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "We talked about this. Clinging to the past isn't healthy. Emma needs to learn to move forward, and you're not helping by encouraging this shrine behavior." Dad looked confused. "I didn't put that there." Jessica's eyes snapped to me, but I was innocently doing homework at the kitchen table, earbuds in, apparently oblivious to the conversation. She couldn't accuse me directly without revealing her true nature, so she had to settle for removing the photo again while shooting me suspicious glances. The next day, I escalated. 3 more photos appeared around the house. Mom's reading chair was moved back to its original position by the window. The throw pillows Jessica had banished to the basement somehow found their way back to the couch. Jessica's facade began to crack. She snapped at Dad over minor things, her voice taking on a shrill quality that made him flinch. Her perfect composure was slipping, and the manipulative mask was starting to show cracks. "Someone is moving things around this house," she announced at dinner, her fork clattering against her plate. "Things I specifically organized. It's like someone is trying to sabotage the progress we've made." Progress. Still using that word to describe the systematic destruction of our family's history. "Maybe the house is haunted," I said innocently, not looking up from my meal. "Mom always said she'd never really leave this place." The color drained from Jessica's face. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she wasn't stupid. She knew someone was working against her, and the psychological pressure of not knowing who or why was eating away at her confidence. By the end of the week, Jessica was jumping at shadows. Every creak of the house, every moved object, every small change sent her into spirals of paranoid rage. She installed security cameras, but somehow they kept malfunctioning. She changed the locks, but things continued to move. The truth was simpler than she realized. I'd been learning her routines, her habits, her weaknesses, learning that she took sleeping pills every night and slept like the dead until her alarm, learning that she never checked the basement or the attic, dismissing them as storage areas beneath her notice, learning that she'd never actually lived in a house before. All her previous cons had taken place in apartments or condos. She didn't understand that old houses have character, have secret passages and hidden spaces that children discover and never forget. The house itself was helping me. Every loose floorboard, every creaky stair, every door that swung on its own in the draft, they were all allies in my campaign to drive Jessica to the breaking point. But the real psychological warfare began when I started returning her victims' belongings. Remember the jewelry she'd safely stored away? Copies of each piece began appearing in Dad's bathroom, his office, his car. Not the originals. I wasn't stupid enough to tip my hand that early, but exact replicas that I'd had made using Mom's detailed photos and appraisals. Jessica would find Mom's wedding ring on Dad's nightstand and have to pretend she didn't know how it got there. She'd discovered the pearl necklace in his jacket pocket and couldn't ask about it without revealing that she'd stolen the original. Each planted item was a landmine that she had to carefully step around, maintaining her innocent act while simmering with rage and confusion. The breaking point came 3 weeks into my campaign. I'd been saving Mom's charm bracelet for last, the one piece that had the most sentimental value, the one that would hurt Jessica the most to see returned from whatever fence she'd sold it to. I left it on Dad's breakfast plate where he couldn't miss it. His reaction was everything I'd hoped for and more. He picked up the bracelet with trembling hands, his eyes filling with tears as he examined each familiar charm. The tiny piano from my 5th birthday, the graduation cap from when I finished elementary school, the heart inscribed with "World's Best Mom" that I'd saved allowance money to buy her for Mother's Day. "Where did this come from?" he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Jessica, who had been pouring herself coffee, went rigid. Her hand shook as she set down the pot, coffee sloshing onto the counter. I have no idea," she stammered. "Maybe it was mixed in with some other things? Maybe the donation center returned it by mistake?" But Dad wasn't listening to her lies anymore. He was staring at the bracelet, and I could see the memories flooding back. Mom wearing it to every important event in my life. The way she'd fidget with the charms when she was nervous. The careful ritual of selecting a new charm for each milestone. "This was in the jewelry box," he said slowly, his voice gaining strength. "The jewelry box you said only contained costume jewelry. The jewelry box you donated without asking me." Jessica's face cycled through several expressions. Panic, anger, calculation, and finally the cold mask she wore when cornered. "Max, you're being emotional about worthless trinkets. I was trying to help you. Help me." Dad's voice rose for the first time in months. "Help me by throwing away my wife's belongings? Help me by erasing every trace of the woman I loved for 25 years. This was the moment I'd been working toward. Dad was finally seeing Jessica clearly, finally understanding what she'd been doing. The spell she'd cast over him was breaking, and underneath was the man I remembered, the one who would fight for his family. Jessica realized she was losing control. Her mask slipped completely, revealing the calculating predator underneath. "Your precious wife is dead, Max," she snarled. "Dead women don't need jewelry. Dead women don't need photographs. Dead women don't need their pathetic little shrines taking up space in the homes of the living." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, which in many ways, he was. The grieving widower who'd been easy prey was gone, replaced by a man who was finally angry about the right things. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my house, get out of my wife's house, take your things and leave." Jessica laughed, but it sounded forced, desperate. "You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go? We're partners in this, Max. We're building a life together." "We're not building anything," Dad said, his voice gaining power with each word. "You've been tearing down everything my wife and I built together. You've been destroying my daughter's inheritance and calling it progress. You've been stealing from us and calling it organization." That's when Jessica made her final mistake. Pushed too far, stripped of her mask, she revealed exactly who she really was. "Fine," she spat. "You want the truth? Your wife was a pack rat, and your daughter is a spoiled brat who needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her precious memories. I was doing you both a favor by getting rid of that junk. Those antiques? I sold them to people who actually appreciate quality. That jewelry? It's worth more than you deserve to have sitting in a dusty box. And this house? It could be beautiful if it wasn't cluttered with the belongings of a dead woman." The words hung in the air like poison. Dad's face went through a transformation I'd never seen before. The gentle man who avoided conflict, who'd let Jessica walk all over him for months, disappeared. In his place stood someone I barely recognized, someone capable of real rage. But I was ready for this moment. I pulled out my phone, where I'd been recording the entire conversation. "Actually, Jessica," I said calmly, "I think you'll find that those antiques and that jewelry were worth quite a bit more than you realized." Both of them turned to stare at me. Jessica's eyes widened as she saw the phone in my hand, understanding dawning on her face. "You see," I continued, standing up and walking to the kitchen drawer where I'd hidden Mom's envelope. "Mom left very detailed records of everything in this house: appraisals, photographs, insurance policies. She also left instructions about what to do if anyone ever tried to steal from her family." I spread the documents across the kitchen table like playing cards, bank statements showing the true value of what Jessica had donated, photos of Jessica removing items from our house, insurance claims that had already been filed for theft and property destruction. Jessica's face went white as she realized the scope of what she was looking at. "She knew," I said simply. "Mom knew exactly what kind of person you are. She'd dealt with predators like you before, people who target grieving families and steal their most precious belongings while pretending to help." Dad picked up one of the appraisals, his hands shaking as he read the estimated value of Mom's worthless antique furniture. Thousands of dollars per piece. Items that had been in our family for generations, sold for pennies to feed Jessica's greed. "Jennifer Masterson," I continued, watching Jessica flinch at the sound of her real name. "That's your real name, isn't it? Not Jessica Martin. You've done this before. 3 times, actually. Always the same pattern. Target a widower, move in, steal everything valuable, then disappear when the money runs out." Jessica was backing toward the door now, her designer mask completely gone. What remained was a cornered animal, dangerous and unpredictable. "You can't prove anything," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I smiled. Mom's smile, the one she used when she was 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. "Actually, I can prove everything. Mom hired investigators. She documented your entire con. She even recorded some of your phone conversations." That was a lie, but Jessica didn't know that. Her face crumpled as she realized how completely she'd been outmaneuvered. "What do you want?" she whispered. "I want everything back. Every piece of jewelry, every antique, every item you stole from this family. I want you to return it all, apologize to my father, and then disappear forever." "And if I don't?" I gestured to the documents spread across the table. "Then I turn all of this over to the police, along with evidence of your previous cons. Grand theft, fraud, elder abuse. You'll be looking at serious prison time." Jessica's eyes darted between the evidence and the door, calculating her chances. She was realizing, perhaps for the first time in her career, that she'd picked the wrong family to victimize. "You have 24 hours, I continued. "Return everything, or face the consequences." She left without another word, her designer heels clicking frantically across the floor as she fled the scene of her failed con. Dad and I stood in the sudden silence, surrounded by the evidence of Mom's final gift to us, the knowledge and tools we needed to protect ourselves. "She really knew," Dad said wonderfully, picking up Mom's letter and reading it again. "She was protecting us even after Jessica tried to erase her," I finished. "But you can't erase someone who plans that far ahead." The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I spent them at the storage unit, cataloging everything Mom had saved and preparing for either Jessica's compliance or her defiance. Dad spent them going through the house, seeing clearly for the first time how much had been stolen from us. But Jessica surprised me. At exactly 23 hours and 57 minutes after her deadline, a moving truck pulled up to our house. Over the next 3 hours, men in uniforms carried in box after box of our belongings, the real jewelry carefully packed in tissue paper, the antiques somehow recovered from whatever black market Jessica had sold them to. even Mom's garden tools, apparently rescued from whatever fate Jessica had planned for them. Jessica herself stood on the sidewalk, supervising the return of our property with the expression of someone swallowing poison. She'd aged years in the past day, her perfect composure replaced by the haggard look of someone who'd realized her career was over. When the last box had been delivered, she approached our front door one final time. Dad and I waited for her on the porch, the evidence of her crime spread across a card table between us and her. "Everything's there," she said, her voice flat and defeated. "Every piece of jewelry, every antique, even the things I'd already disposed of. I had to buy some of it back at a loss, but it's all accounted for." "And?" I prompted. She took a shaky breath. "And I apologize to both of you. I took advantage of your grief, and I stole things that meant more to you than they ever could to me." It wasn't a sincere apology. Jessica wasn't capable of real remorse, but it was an acknowledgement of defeat. She understood that she'd lost completely, that her career of victimizing grieving families was over. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out a final document from Mom's envelope. "You're going to sign this." It was a confession. A detailed admission of everything she'd done, written in legal language that would ensure she could never try this con again. If she ever targeted another family, if she ever attempted fraud or theft again, this document would guarantee she went to prison. Jessica read it twice, her face growing paler with each line. But she signed it. She had no choice. "Now disappear," Dad said, speaking for the first time since she'd returned. "And if I ever see you near my family again, I'll make sure that confession finds its way to every police department in the country." We watched her walk away, her designer luggage rolling behind her on the broken sidewalk. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by her defeat. The predator who'd swept into our lives with such confidence was leaving as a broken woman who would never again underestimate the power of a mother's love or a daughter's determination. It took 3 weeks to restore the house to its proper state. Dad and I worked together, hanging Mom's photographs back on the walls, arranging her furniture in the places where it belonged, filling the rooms with the warmth and character that Jessica had tried to strip away. The house felt alive again, not because we were trying to preserve Mom and Amber, but because we were finally free to remember her properly. Her love wasn't something to be hidden away or moved past. It was the foundation everything else was built on. Dad found a grief counselor, someone who helped him understand how Jessica had manipulated his mourning process and his guilt. He learned to recognize the difference between healing and erasure, between moving forward and abandoning the past. I started college that fall, majoring in criminal justice with a focus on elder abuse and financial fraud. Mom's story wouldn't end with Jessica's defeat. It would continue through the families I'd help protect from future predators. But the most important change was in Dad himself. The man who'd been weak in the face of manipulation became strong again. He started volunteering with organizations that helped recently widowed people avoid the kind of schemes Jessica had run. He shared our story, warning others about the signs to watch for and the tactics predators used. "Your mother saved us," he told me one evening as we sat in her garden, which we'd replanted together using the original design Jessica had tried to destroy. Even after she was gone, she was still protecting us. "She taught me that love doesn't end with death," I replied, fingering the charm bracelet on my wrist, the one that had started Jessica's downfall. "It just gets smarter." 6 months later, I received a letter from a police detective in Arizona. Jessica, using the name Sandra Phillips this time, had been arrested for attempting to defraud an elderly widower. The confession she'd signed for us had been part of the evidence that put her away for 5 years. The detective thanked us for our documentation and cooperation. Apparently, our case had helped them connect Jessica to several other unsolved thefts across the Southwest. She wouldn't be targeting any more grieving families for a very long time. I kept that letter in Mom's jewelry box, right next to the charm bracelet and the key to the storage unit where her final gift to us was kept. Sometimes, when I was having a difficult day, or feeling overwhelmed by college or life in general, I'd open the box and remember what I'd learned about the difference between being broken and being defeated. Broken things can be repaired, made stronger than they were before. Defeated things just disappear, like Jessica had, leaving nothing behind but cautionary tales and police reports. Mom had been broken by her illness, but she'd never been defeated. She'd used her final weeks not to despair, but to plan, to prepare, to ensure that the people she loved would be protected even after her voice was silenced. That's the kind of love that changes everything. Not the sentimental kind that clings to objects and memories, but the strategic kind that anticipates threats and builds defenses. The kind that turns grief into strength and loss into purpose. Jessica had tried to destroy what was mine, my family's history, my father's dignity, my mother's legacy. But her quiet revenge had changed everything, not through destruction, but through protection. Not through erasing the past, but through securing the future. Standing in Mom's garden, watching Dad tend to the roses she'd planted years before, I understood finally what she'd been trying to teach me. Love isn't just about holding on, it's about knowing when to let go, when to fight, and when to prepare for battles that haven't been fought yet. Jessica thought she was targeting a broken family. Instead, she'd awakened something she never could have anticipated. A daughter who'd inherited not just her mother's belongings, but her mother's strength, her strategic mind, and her absolute refusal to let the people she loved be harmed. The house was full of life again, but it wasn't a shrine to the past. It was a fortress for the future, built on the foundation of a love that had proven stronger than death, smarter than predators, and more enduring than any scheme designed to destroy it. If this story of quiet strength and strategic justice resonated with you, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Emma revealed her mother's final gift, the perfect trap that had been waiting for Jessica all along. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload that shows how love can be the ultimate form of protection.